Strap in, there's a lot for me to cover, so let me not waste any more time. The NTSB has held another press conference where its chair, among other associates, highlighted new findings and developments in investigating the door plug incident occurring on a routine Alaska Airlines flight. These developments have shed further light on what took place during that flight alongside the features, plus clarity over what's next for the NTSB's investigation. The NTSB says that the aircraft departed from runway 28L of Portland at 5:06 p.m, with at 5:12 p.m, cabin pressure dropping significantly. At this point, data indicates the plane was at 14,830 feet. A further dramatic pressure drop was recorded only seconds later, declining to 9.08 psi. The aircraft continued to climb for the next minute before reaching a maximum altitude of 16,320 feet before descending back towards Portland. By 5:17, the aircraft descended below 10,000 feet, and at 5:26 p.m, the plane landed safely back onto runway 28L at Portland. This is the preliminary timeline for what occurred per the NTSB chair. However, of course, it excludes details of sensors going off throughout the ordeal. The flight attendants described the situation as stressful from when the blowout occurred to when the aircraft touched down back in Portland. It was highlighted through interviews that there was a lack of understanding of what was happening, primarily driven by an obstructed view of the attendants. Additionally, they mentioned the difficulty in communicating throughout the incident. Inside the cockpit, there was much of the same distress over the situation. The cockpit door is actually designed to open during a rapid decompression, as it did at the time of the blowout. However, it has now been revealed that the pilots aboard this were unaware. Boeing has said that they'll now be needing to change the manual to reflect this. Additionally, the pilots aboard the flight said one of their checklists flew into the cabin alongside a headset coming off. It was reported again that communicating between each other was very difficult, alongside hearing instructions from air traffic controllers. So all those on board did an absolutely splendid job in getting the aircraft down safely, alongside all the passengers escaping without any major injuries sustained. A topic of conversation following the incident involving the 737-9 has been the safety of other variants in the MAX series. The NTSB said their current priority is the incident at hand. However, they have made it very clear that they are not afraid to go broader in the future and focus on other variants included in the family. This is something they've done before, but this would only be based on recommendations, and if ultimately at the end of the day they believed it to be necessary. The NTSB notes that they are aware of United and Alaska Airlines reporting loose bolts on some of their 737-9s only hours earlier than when they were conducting their press conference. Teams are currently collecting all the relevant information from this, with follow-up inspections to take place afterwards. While the bolts have been a focal point, especially with new findings, the NTSB must follow the evidence trail before venturing to other aircraft types. But let's now take some time to understand what happened, as we did get some more details on this front. Following their initial investigations, the NTSB said there were no discrepancies found on the installed right aft door plug today. However, they did provide more clarity. In simple terms, the door plug moved upward, resulting in the 12 stop gaps becoming disengaged. The door blew out, resulting in the guide tracks fracturing. What's very important to note is that the recovery of the 4 bolts crucial to not having the door plug move upward have not been recovered. This means that the NTSB cannot yet determine if they were installed, damaged, not fitted correctly, or many other possibilities. The NTSB says there are hinges on the bottom and guides at the top. The hinges and guides aim to get the door onto the aircraft and allow it to move outward for maintenance. I'll get into that a little bit more. But during the briefing, those presenting really used the analogy of a high five to explain how the stop fittings and plug door mechanics work. Essentially, the features above hit each other to prevent the door from coming out, as there's substantial pressure not just inside the cabin but also outside too. The stop fittings do not have a locking mechanism. This is where the high five element comes into the fray. They press against each other from the inside outward, holding that door in place. The upward motion is needed to get the door in place on installation and to move the door outward during inspection and maintenance. As a result, yes, you do require this movement when installing the door, among other moments too. However, when you are not doing these said tasks, there needs to be no movement, and that's where the bolts come in. If you never allowed any movement, then you'd never be able to get the door out or off. So the highly discussed bolts don't necessarily keep the door in place. More so, you could argue that the 4 bolts in the mechanism ensure the door doesn't translate upwards following an inspection or routine maintenance. These bolts would ideally ensure also that the door doesn't fly off or disengage from the stop fittings. The NTSB says, however, that the bolts can break or have several other things take place with them. This needs to be worked out with time. I do apologize if it's a little bit confusing. Don't worry, I was just as confused trying to make sense of it all. I thought it would be worth mentioning as well that the NTSB is unclear on how many United Airlines 737-9s have those loose bolts. This is information they say the FAA will have. In regards to other issues besides bolts on the aircraft, this is also another area that they do not have further information on. We will find out more as time comes. Clarification was provided once more that the stop fittings faced fractures after the plug door disengaged, but it doesn't explain why the door disengaged yet. The door plug is set to be sent back towards Washington, D.C. The plug will be crated and shipped along with other parts. They will then be closely inspected in a lab. The NTSB says a time will be set up which is convenient for all employees to really take a look at what occurred. Timeframes are unknown, however, it was noted that investigations can take anywhere from a year to 18 months. However, once the items get into a lab, investigators can better understand what occurred and generally present these findings. One of the most significant points of interest will be if the bolts were present or tightened correctly, which could have directly led to the door disengaging and therefore blowing off the aircraft. The NTSB made note finally that it does not ground aircraft. That is up to the FAA, and it is also up to the FAA to determine when the 737-9 can fly again based on their findings and constant communication between all relevant parties. At the moment, it's unclear when the 737-9's impacted will fly again. It will be a game of patience as more comes to light and inspections can formally take place. If you have any thoughts on the unfolding situation, let me know down below in the comments. I really appreciate the support here on the channel. Please do take care, do also be safe, and I will see you next time for more coverage on the aviation industry and hopefully eventually moving away from this 737 MAX debacle.
And we'll fly.